Hi, Luke here from the Talking Theatre podcast, and before you start this episode, this is just a warning to say that this podcast does contain some strong language and adult humour, but also it is hopefully a bit of a laugh, and, we talk all things theatre. So, with that formal announcement out of the way, let's get on with this week's podcast. Hi mate, good morning, how are you?
I'm not bad. I'm not bad. Yourself?
I'm alright. I haven't really been enjoying the heat, I have to say.
It's been a bit much, hasn't it?
Intense. Why is it in this country that when we have nice, well, I use nice like that, nice weather, it just isn't nice?
It's too much.
It is.
I've been doing sort of lawn mowing, hedge trimming stuff, and it's just been breaking me bit by bit. Although, I'm now facing the opposite today, because it's thunderstorming outside, really heavy thunderstorming, but if this stops before it gets to about 1-ish, I have to go out.
Lovely.
So, the opposite of me, it would just be getting covered in shit and water and rain and all of it.
Yeah.
So,
it was raining here this morning, and I opened the window just here, and I put my head out, I was like, oh, it's like there's a cool breeze, and it's steadily getting worse and whatever. I mean, I actually downloaded a temperature app for the first time this morning. I don't know how accurate it was, but it's... have a look. Find out what it is actually saying. My room says it is.
I mean, don't just use the weather app, that
Have you ever come across the Apple weather app before, mate?
No, on Android.
It's a bit... well, it's crap.
Like Apple Maps.
Well, yeah, because that's also crap. That's got me lost on a number of occasions. Apparently, it feels like 22 in my room. I don't know if you can see that. It's certainly. I think that's a little bit wrong because it's just so sweaty,
Yeah, no, tell me about it.
Being at the top of the house, it just doesn't help. And
of course, yeah. Nah,
I've only got one fan, and it's a bit of pain.
I'm currently on the ground floor, which I'm very happy with.
Yeah. If there is a bit of noise, other than Tom's rain, it's because my cleaners are here, so if you hear the Hoover, don't stress, it's not nothing too important, other than...
Cleaners.
Do we need to address the fact that that's not actually down to me, it's part of my... because I have all bills included. I mean, when I was looking for a house, I didn't go, do you know what's essential and a make or break for me? Must have a cleaner. But yeah, they are here at the moment, so if you hear anything, then it's because they're busy cleaning the bathrooms and the kitchen. Other than that, I don't think I've got any other life news, so should we get on with this week's show?
Let's do it.
Hello everybody and welcome back to the Talking Theatre podcast with me, Luke.
And me, Tom.
And welcome to episode 9 of this Talking Theatre podcast series. Hopefully you enjoyed our new branding that we've been working on over the past couple of weeks and so forth. And today there's a little bit of theatre news to catch up with. Well, it's not really news, it's just we had some lovely images over the past couple of nights of all of... the theatre buildings and arts buildings being illuminated red and nice to see.
It's been really touching. I saw an aerial shot of London and the amount of red that was there, I'm just like, it just goes to show quite how many arts buildings that are supporting arts and stuff there are in London, because it looked like at least sort of like 30-40% of them were red, or maybe that's just the light that you see in it, I don't know, but there was enough there to be like, oh, that's a lot. And it was really touching to see, and seeing all the people protest on the streets and stuff with red lights, and so I think it's just really nice. I know it's obviously for a horrible reason that we're having to do this, but it's touching when a community, especially like this one, comes together to have the same goal and the same aim. And I've said this from the start, one of the things that's been inspirational from lockdown is the way the arts community has bound itself together and has made the best of a bad situation and have really supported each other in sort of pushing on and keeping positive and keeping themselves alive. It's really nice.
Exactly, and I think that's one of the great things about the arts community as a whole. We are all brought up on the idea of collaboration and coming together, and I think that, as you say, that's something that we've seen showcased at its best over the past couple of days. So anyway, this week's episode is a bit kind of touching on a little bit on what you spoke about last week, Tom, and something that's quite important, we think, to talk about. I know I mentioned it a few times last week on the podcast, but never actually got it out. So I've actually got it out this week. It's down here, and here we go. It is literally like a dictionary or a thesaurus. It is absolutely huge.
It's tiny.
I know. If you look at how small the words are. And hold it onto the camera. I don't know if you can see that, but
that's nuts. Well, since you've got yours out, if you show me yours, I'll show you mine. I think that's.
I will happily do that. You know that.
Everything.
I mean, on the double page, there's sometimes 2 or 3 scenes.
That's mad.
Small.
I've just tried and get out my Shakespeare, and I've just dropped everything in the process. So give me a sec. I'll be.
I mean, honestly, I can actually see it though, which is a good thing. But yeah, it's quite small.
Right, you ready for a completely different type of Shakespeare?
Yeah. Oh, that's sexy.
It's a big boy hardback.
Mm-hmm.
It's been tattered because it's been to every single place since I was 17. So all 4 or 5 places I've lived since then. But I got it for an award at school back in 2014.
Wow.
So I've had this for 6 years?
Good maths.
But it looks. Oh, hold on. Jesus, it's heavy. It's got illustrations like that.
Oh yes.
And then it's got lots of scenes on it. Just go through another one. That's just a text page.
That's also quite small.
It's tiny, but it's pretty.
How many pages is yours? Because I've just looked in the back of mine and it says it's 1,436 pages.
Oh, let's compare dick sizes, shall we? Let's really get into this.
I mean, if yours is 1,436, then you're doing well. But
well, no, I'm 464.
Do you know what?
Significantly.
You kind of look like a 464.
Huh?
You kind of look like a 464.
Why, thank you, sir. Thank you.
It's alright. No, it's just so chunky. I'm just going to...
Big books.
I'm going to put my big Shakespeare book on the table. Oh dear. It's getting all wrong now. Yes, so as we can see, today's episode is on Shakespeare, and specifically we are going to talk about how we think Shakespeare can be made more inclusive and be better suited to the curriculums that it unfortunately seems to find itself within.
I think we're looking at sort of how to make it more accessible for, I think, to be honest, when we said, originally I was thinking younger audiences and trying to get people involved from a young age, but honestly just any age, just people who may not have been, seen Shakespeare a bit like an intimidating topic, which to be fair it is, but if you change it here and there you can, well that's what we're going to get into.
That's what we're going to discuss today. So as Tom was saying, we originally kind of thought, how about thinking about younger audiences to start with, but I think that a lot of the things that we're going to necessarily discuss are intersectional, and they do kind of cross over in many ways to older audiences and whatever. So we should probably suggest how we think that Shakespeare could either be rebranded or made more accessible, and in what ways. And we both had a chat about this, and we think that the answer is probably in the language.
Now, I think in terms of where it needs to change from here on out, language for sure, because that is something that a lot of people struggle with. And when you study it in English, because I seem to find I didn't really study Shakespeare much in theatre when I was studying it. It was just in English side.
Same.
It was never looked at as performance until a later A-level side. And the language it's not easy. Even when I read over Shakespeare now, after having a lot of years of reading it and watching it and things, there are lots that goes. But if you don't have the right English teacher and you've got the wrong sort of end of the stick for a play, especially when it's one of the tougher plays. It's a real challenge. So having language being a bit more easy is good. But I did want to say that the way people are starting to, well, not starting to, it's been like this forever, but making Shakespeare contemporary, so putting it in a contemporary setting with contemporary props. Like the one that really stands out is, I think, Baz Luhrmann, the Romeo and Juliet film.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great example because they've put it in a contemporary setting and really sort of made it accessible. Because I know loads of people who don't know Shakespeare, but they love that film. And they'll go, oh yeah, it's great. I don't know any other Shakespeare, but that film is great. So I think it's a good, we're starting on a good angle for it, but we need to now tweak it a little bit more for a generation that has a much shorter attention span. But yeah, so language I think is now where we need to tweak it a little bit.
And I think, as you said, I also didn't really come across Shakespeare at GCSE level in drama. It was only really in English. And I think that one of the problems was that you might be doing... I mean, I did Romeo and Juliet. I can remember that being the A-level... the GCSE text, sorry, for English literature. And you only have, when you do your English GCSEs, you only have, obviously, because there's different types of text you have to cover, you only have so many weeks, but you couldn't really spend that long on actually learning about the play because you had to get it read. But because the students struggled to read it, it took so long to read. And then, although Romeo and Juliet isn't the most complex thematically in terms of what's going on and what some of the characters are thinking and doing, but you can't even get onto that if you can't get past the language. Then how do you expect students to go and sit an exam and say, tell me about the motives of Romeo or why did Juliet do so-and-so in an exam if they can't understand what's going on because they haven't had...
Sort of learning quotes and just regurgitating them, which is, it's not right. I remember when I did my A-level English, we studied, we studied "'Tis Pity She's a Whore" as well, which is not Shakespeare, but similar sort of thing. And then we did Antony and Cleopatra, and I'd never encountered that play before, and my God, is it a beast.
It's complex.
But we went through it, and what we did was every lesson, we had 2 English lessons with that specific teacher, because sometimes we had 2 sides to English, but
yes.
That specific teacher twice a week, and we literally just sit and read the play from start to finish, but he'd stop after every sort of 2-3 pages and go back and be like, right, this. And while he wasn't the most energetic of teachers, he did know what he was talking about, and he went through it methodically and broke it down. And it wasn't particularly, it sounds horrible, it wasn't particularly inspiring, but I'd already found a love of Shakespeare originally. So to me it was very helpful, because now I understand Antony and Cleopatra. But for others in the class, they were there like, because it was just for them reading a Shakespeare play and then monotonely discussing what happened. And if you don't put feeling behind what is said, it's a lot more difficult to get behind it.
But I think
that's where a lot of teaching falls.
I think you've hit the nail on the head when you said reading and a play, because you haven't once mentioned there that you ever saw a version of that play during your time of studying it.
I think we may have seen a really old version, but I don't remember it, put it that way.
So, if you can't even see a version of the play that you're studying and see it in its supposed form, how are students that aren't, as you said, you kind of knew a little bit about Shakespeare and had a love and interest for it before that, but if students that aren't, because a lot of English students, I suppose when you get to A-level you've actually chosen to do English literature, so it doesn't mean that you're necessarily doing drama as another of your subjects. So,
a lot of us did, but there were quite a few there that sort of didn't.
Yeah, so if you're not doing the actual form of subject which the majority of your work in your English class is supposed to be performed in, that seems really, really difficult for those students to really understand what's going on.
I mean, I'd argue even to some extent, because obviously we do sonnets as well, but I did Seamus Heaney as well as poetry. And I'd say to some extent the poetry as well, having that as a performed art as opposed to just a textual one helps you understand it so much more.
Mm.
Because it sounds sad to say, but I used to take the Seamus Heaney poems that we were studying, take them home. Oh, and Robert Browning as well. Take them home and read them out loud to try and understand their sort of the tempo and stuff. And it made it so much clearer for me. But yeah. So I got out my Antony and Cleopatra here, what I did for just one of the school, and it's literally, you go through it and just bit by bit, he give us sort of notes and ask us.
That's exactly what my 12th night book looks like from school.
But it's very helpful.
Yeah.
I didn't read the rest of it, as in like the introductions and stuff. I didn't read any of that. But,
yeah.
It was very helpful. But again, if you didn't already have a love for Shakespeare, it wasn't that.
Yeah.
So how would you, if you were in charge of education, performance, development of Shakespeare inspiration, how would you sort of go about it?
I mean, I think it's funny that you're set on a day such as today saying that I would be in charge of education. I think that's somewhat of a coincidence.
Yeah.
But the less said on that, probably the better.
I'll tell you what, I'm glad it's not me this year. I'm glad it's not me.
But I think there's two things. I think students have to be able to see the work performed on stage. Because realistically, I understand why Shakespeare has to be taught in English. Because as a text and as a piece of history, it is so crucial to English literature.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
But I also think that with any play that anybody does in English, it's a play. And plays are written to be performed. So if the students aren't seeing them performed the way that the playwright has written them, I don't know as if I think that's beneficial for the students. So for me, there's two things.
Yeah.
A, is Shakespeare accessible to go and take those students to go and see a performance of it? I would argue extremely no. It's not.
Although, despite your dislike of it, National Theatre Live and live streams do make that more possible.
They do, but I also do think that there is something about the fact that Shakespeare and the joy that Shakespeare's early audiences got out of his work was seeing it live.
This is true. Okay, this is true. I'm just saying, for accessibility reasons, live streams are very viable for educational purposes.
Absolutely agree with you on that. And I know last week we got out my DVD of the Globe version of 12th Night that I saw at school. But you cannot match that in-performance experience.
No,
so I think that
completely valuable.
Has to be the first thing. And I think you have to then think about where the schools are located in and around the country and who has access to doing or having the access to go and see the performances. I mean, I was very lucky in year 12. We went to see Benedict Cumberbatch's version of Hamlet at the Barbican. But I also understand that that wasn't the text that we were studying. And I know that we... And I also know that I went and did a King Lear workshop at another school. I won't name names, but the teacher had a connection, should we say, to the school. But that accessibility was kind of there for me, but I understand that it's not there for us, and I don't think that's fair nor right. So what I'm saying is, if Shakespeare isn't done at a local enough level, then you're already excluding a massive chunk of your student population, because if it's only really being done in London or at the RSC, then you've already got a problem of getting students to there, and we all know the health and safety and all the paperwork that's involved in arranging a school trip, and then there's the price of the tickets.
Yeah, which quite often can't be subsidised, given that you're putting travel on top. You probably have to feed the kids as well. Supervision, a certain number of teachers you have to a certain number of students.
Yeah. I mean, we know from our own experience as university students how hard it is to get multiple batches of tickets at an affordable price. So, to me, it's alright saying that the answer is in the language, because I think it is, because I think that if the language was rewritten in a more contemporary kind of sphere, the themes and the characters are still extremely and will make it more understandable for the characters, for the students, sorry. But I also think that there is this level, or this sense of they need to be able to see it, which is why I think
localized.
Yeah, which is why I think the answer probably lies somewhere in between theatre and education, and a more contemporary feel to the language of Shakespeare.
Well, to jump off that, the contemporary feel, one of the best Shakespeare productions that stands out to me, which was, I consider an adaptation, is Frantic Assembly's Othello.
Mm-hmm.
I was lucky enough to do that for my drama A-level. We studied that, and I had to write, I think it was 1,000 words coursework. Back then, that seemed like a lot.
That's a lot of words, yeah.
That is a dream.
Well, you say that, but actually, I don't think 1,000 words now is.
Oh, yeah, but you could just bash it out a night before. It's great. And 1,000 words is nothing. If I wanted to get into it, it's not enough.
Yeah.
But if it's just I want to get it done, easy. But anyway, so this production, it was the traditional script, it was the traditional language, but it was set in, I think it was a northern pub in a contemporary setting. But what they did was they put Frantic Assembly's classic brandings, like the physical theatre, on top of it, and it made it so electric. And I actually can't remember the name. I think is it Cassius? I don't remember. The one who is tricked by Iago. Yeah, whatever. But anyway, so the scene that they come for when Iago tricks Othello's sort of man, I think it's Cassius. I can't remember. We'll find out. But anyway, so when he tricks him, they do it into a whole physical theatre scene where they get him drunk, they trick him, you can see the eye lines, you can see everything going on, and they use physical theatre to basically explain what the language meant without saying the language quite explicitly. So it felt a lot more natural in places, but it also felt a lot more heightened in others in order to contrast the complicated and the simplified. And it made it incredible. And to this day, I think, if I'm bold enough to say, I think it's one of the best productions of Shakespeare I've ever seen. Just because it really was amazing. And I saw it in Birmingham, I think? Birmingham or Nottingham? I can't remember. But either way, it was a touring show. And the fact that it was touring, like you said, got around a lot. But Frantic Assembly is always very good at community stuff and getting people involved in things. So that makes sense. They're also very good at education. So I also studied other Frantic Assembly stuff because they had live streams, they had productions going on around the country, they had stuff to do. I even took part in Ignition, didn't get in, but I applied for Ignition and stuff, did workshops with them and stuff like that. So they're very good at this. So I think their model of practice is very good. But this is something as well that we discussed last week, and I think possibly it may be time, and this is going to be controversial because a lot of people will disagree, but to shift up the language.
You were right, Cassio.
Well, is it Cassius?
Cassio.
Cassio.
Yeah. He's honourable lieutenant.
I maybe think of someone else. I don't know.
Cassius is the character in Julius Caesar.
That's it.
Okay, carry on.
Cassio, yeah. But so to shift up in language is possibly necessary. So, if you say 10 things I hate about you as a film, to a lot of people, they won't realise it's Shakespeare. But obviously throughout the film there's lots of Shakespearean references, but it's literally a direct adaptation of Taming of the Shrew.
Mm-hmm.
If we do that in theatre and only slightly change it, but give it enough new life to make it understandable, not pretentious, to be honest, because a lot of Shakespeare when it's done is very pretentious and over the top, you know. Make it a laugh as well, because Shakespeare, when he originally did it, a lot of it is smut. It's horrible. Yeah. Like it's sort of, if it came out today in a new writer, it would be like a 15 or an 18. Yeah. Like a lot of it is quite crude.
He had quite a dirty mind.
He's a filthy man.
Yeah.
Well, I say man, it could be a woman or it could be anyone. We don't really know. Shakespeare is up in the air a bit. But yeah, so all this stuff, if it's taught in the way that it was meant to be performed originally, by adapting it and making it engaging for a contemporary audience by changing the language, but keeping the characters, the plot and the story and intentions all the same, you'll be able to access the story a lot better, so you'll be able to understand what's going on better, you'll understand all the characters' intentions and how they will interlink. But also, you can then go back to the original text and have a much better understanding of what is being said, and then you can study it in class, or you can just appreciate it when you go to see another version of it later on in a different way. Exactly. And I think that would be a really interesting way around it. I don't know if it will catch on. I know a lot of people, sort of traditionalists, would not like that. But I think it's a good way to start as an accessible avenue.
But I do think, though, when you say when traditionists might not like that, I think there's a reason as to why they won't like that. It's because they think that there is a level of intelligence that is required to understand Shakespeare, and with that level of intelligence brings a multiplicity of other things, I think it's fair to say. I don't think we need to go in or give any more ideas what I mean by that, of understanding Shakespeare. Because the thing I was going to say when you were talking about the crudeness and whatever in Shakespeare's language, the reason it was so crude was because of his audience back in the 16th century. Because his audience, if you was to take his audience, the globe audience, well, I'm talking obviously from the late 16th century to a globe audience or RSC audience probably now, they're completely different.
So vastly different.
Yeah, and I think that we forget that Shakespeare was written for, quote unquote, the common folk. Because how many times, other than the Scottish play, did Shakespeare actually write his plays to have a bit of a dig about the upper class folk?
Like he's a genius in what he does. But one thing that really strikes me is I remember watching Doctor Who. It's a bit of a sidetrack, but in series 3, I don't know, when they go see Shakespeare, and the first thing he comes out and he's just rude and offensive. And I'm like, when I was younger, I was like, oh, that's not right. They've tweaked this to make it funny. And as I got older, I was like, no, actually, they are just that's just how he was. They're just making it modern, and it made me interested a lot more. But also, I think as well, when it comes to especially teaching, they need to be more honest about Shakespeare, because there's a lot of speculation about what he's being said in terms of it being a contradictory thing. So the often joked about is sort of the homosexual nature of Hamlet and Horatio and stuff like that. It's joked about. It's very rarely in schools said as like a boom, this is a possibility of how it was meant to be interpreted, or this and that. And I think if they're a lot more honest about it and not scared to be like, this is controversial at the time, but this is new discoveries and it could be this, it could be that, like that, I would be so much more engaged, because then it makes it more of a, there's not a right answer, there's not a right interpretation. You're open to take Shakespeare however you want to do it, because that's the point of art. Everyone who reads a play or watches a play will take something completely different from it, and Shakespeare is such a good example of that, because the proof is it's been reproduced for hundreds of years in different contemporary settings, different types of actors, and switching up genders, switching up sexualities, switching up everything in it, and it's remained the same core play. So it shows that you can really develop things in different ways without having to teach it one way and say, this is how it is, this is what Shakespeare meant, this is how it is, because by that you just go, okay, great, fine, iambic pentameter and all that, yeah, fine, and then you leave school and you're suddenly not inspired by it, because it's just been one angle that you look down, and that's it. And I don't think that's the right way to do it. You need to allow honesty and opinion when it comes to this to then really develop it.
I totally
agree. A bit of a mad one there.
No, yeah, I'm kind of pleased you did, because firstly my camera decided to turn itself off and stop recording, and then we've had a lovely car alarm show. So yeah,
I covered it perfectly. What can I say?
You did. You used the time efficiently, and you know, I do agree with what you say actually, because there certainly is this level of engagement and this kind of idea that when you're taught Shakespeare, especially in English, that there's so many right answers, but there's not a right answer at all. And there's this level where I think teachers need to be honest and say, this is simply my opinion of what this is, and you can have your opinion, because that's what art is. And
but no, I see what you're saying. It's there needs to be a breadth of opinion, but a problem with that is also exams, because it's very difficult to write. Because I thought when I took English, and especially more importantly when I took philosophy for A level, I thought it would be a lot more expressing thoughts and understanding sort of theories and things that you've got. But it wasn't. It was just regurgitating the same essay multiple times, because that's what you're taught to do. So while I thought philosophy, and to be fair, the classes it was a discussion of thoughts and opinions and ideas. In the exam, it wasn't. In the exam, it was you have to know this, you have to know that, and you have to put it in an argument. And English is the same. You sit there and I found them the other day when I was clearing out this room. Found a load of quotes, little quote cards from Frankenstein, Antony and Cleopatra, Seamus Heaney, all these things. And I'm just like, all I did for English as revision was learn quotes.
Yeah.
And then just reread the book. And you're like, how is that going to develop in a concept? Because one thing I did enjoy about the university work we did was, while there was an element of, in the essays, that is what you had to do, you had to just sort of splurge information and give resources, and this is where you found this, because it's academic. The essays I got the best in were the ones where I allowed myself to really get into it and explore everything around it and then give an opinion. And I got better on those. Obviously I can't be bothered to do that for every essay because I'm a regular student, but if you give someone a chance, especially someone who's young and new to a subject, a chance to think and actually form their own opinion with the guidance of a teacher, not the authoritative, you will think this, then it's a lot more beneficial. And when they get to sort of university or higher level or just life, they'll be a lot more sort of well-rounded to deal with this, I think.
Exactly. And I think that seems like a fairly good point to round this off for this week.
So ultimately, education, sort yourself out, is what we're saying.
Yeah. But you know, I think what is important also to reiterate is that we think that the theatre does have a role to play in this, because it's important that if the theatre gives the education system an option, that then puts it completely back on to the education system. Because at the moment, yes, we all accept that their education system is completely wrong, but it doesn't appear to us that the theatre is necessarily giving them an option to allow them to make it more inclusive and wide-reaching. Of course it is. It's only going to
get harder because of everything that's going on at the moment. It's going to get tough, so we really need to rethink the strategies about how this works. That's going to be tough.
Yeah.
It'll take a long time.
And, you know, I'm if there are people out there that are traditionalists that are listening or watching this podcast and saying, you know, well, you've been saying for the past 10 weeks or however long we've been doing this podcast now or whatever, oh, well, you know, we're going to be restaging classics at the big venues in London and stuff. Yeah, maybe we probably are. But there's no reason as to why, if we redid one of these plays with new language and in a new setting, that you wouldn't still go and see it, mainly because you'd simply be curious.
But, yeah, exactly, but also, why not take these, I'd say, small budget, low cost performances of reinvented language, reinvented setting, reinvented everything, sort of this, that, and the other, but then tour around the smaller theatres that are struggling.
Yeah.
So all the local ones that are in threat of locking down, never opening again. I think it's important that we then tour. It'll give education a chance to reignite passion.
Mm-hmm.
And God knows the arts needs that right now, because we need people to strive for us. As competitive it is, I don't care. Get more people in, because it's a fantastic thing to do. But tour around the country, because just having London-based actors and artists and people who make theatre and stuff, it's not going to work.
No.
We need it all over the country. So tour around the smaller theatres, and everything will be better.
And, you know, we do know that Shakespeare is a financially viable product and has been for many years. And there are still going to be people in these local areas that will still be interested. That, yes, they might go and see London-based theatre, but they'll also still be interested. And it then comes in ticketing and, you know, how the companies that are putting on these works decide to do it. Because you're not telling me that there won't be the opportunity for them over a period of a run to say, do you know what, we're putting an extra couple of matinees and they'll be free of charge, but they're only going to be for school level students, for some schools to bring a whole year potentially in to see the performance, because we can afford to do that even in this tight climate, because we can make our money back by charging the people that are going to come and see the Shakespeare work regardless the right amount of money that they'd go and spend on seeing a piece of Shakespeare.
Well, I think what we've done here, mate, in the short time I've been on it, is
we've solved Shakespeare. We've solved English education.
Bojo, hire us.
Yeah.
Actually, don't. That'd be a dangerous move. That'd be stupid. But yeah, no, I think we've done quite a successful podcast there, mate. We've changed the world. We've set out what we wanted to do.
And if we was to really clickbait for the YouTube algorithm a podcast title, we could just put "We've saved Shakespeare" or something like that. Or
Shakespeare. We saved Shakespeare. We made him worthwhile.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Which seems like a good place to end this week's podcast, and we will probably see you next week. But I'm moving out next week, so maybe we will or maybe we won't.
Maybe a 2-week break. Who knows?
Maybe a 2-week break. So what that means is now you've got to the end of this podcast is, regardless of whether or not there'll be a podcast specifically released next week, it gives you time to go back and look at what we've been doing in the previous weeks. And while you're looking at that, you can subscribe to our channel and hit the like button and all that for the YouTube algorithm, and leave us some thoughts in the comment section down below as to whether or not you specifically agree with us, or whether you think our plan is a good plan for saving Shakespeare or not, or whether you think you're being stupid and that's never going to get through. Leave it all in the comments below, and we may or may not see you next week. So it's
see you later, for sure.
Yeah. So goodbye from me.
Adios.